The cold isn't loud. It doesn't slam into you like a winter storm. It moves quietly, the way ink bleeds across paper, slow, unstoppable. It seeps through stone, creeps under your thin blanket, and settles deep in your bones. Your mattress is made of straw and mice. The mice are warmer than you are. You lie on your side, staring at the faint wobble of lamplight on the wall. The flame breathes, then holds still, as if afraid to draw attention. Somewhere far above, a roof beam groans under the night wind. The palace no longer sleeps, not since the decree. Footsteps scrape along the corridor, slow, measured, pretending to be casual. A cough quickly swallowed. The faint rustle of silk sleeves. Even the air here seems to listen for orders. Your eyes burn. They have burned for days. Your body knows the hour it begs for the dark softness of real sleep. But the emperor says rest is treason, and treason is a thing the body learns to fear more than exhaustion. Once you fell asleep without ceremony. Now you lie still, feeling the weight of wakefulness press against your ribs. You imagine the streets outside the palace walls empty, wind curling around shuttered doors, stray dogs stretched in the pale wash of moonlight. Someone out there is sleeping, breathing deep, their face slack with dreams. You resent them without meaning to. The air here has no dreams, and yet. Sometimes, when you are too tired to think, you wonder if this is what being erased feels like, not a sudden death, but a slow dissolving. The kind that leaves nothing behind. What if history erased you, not because you lived wrongly, but because you were too tired to be remembered? Tell us where you're listening from, or what time your night begins. You wake not because it is morning, but because a drum sounds in the courtyard. It is not loud, just enough to jar the fragile stillness. A single strike, followed by the long, stretched silence that makes you strain to hear another. Your blanket slides from your shoulders, cold air brushes your neck. The drum is the emperor's signal, the reminder that sleep is rationed, not earned. You rise slowly. Your joints ache more than you admit. The floor is hard, the tiles cool against your bare feet. Your sandals wait in the corner, straps curled like sleeping snakes. You slip them on, they squeak. So much for dignity. Outside, the air is dry, thin. The winter wind here does not whip or howl. It drags itself along the stone and into your sleeves. Lanterns sway from the eaves, their light soft, trembling with each gust. You join the others in the courtyard, a line of bent shapes in thick robes. The guards watch from the shadows. You catch their eyes, but they are unreadable, their posture stiff with either discipline or fear. No one speaks. Somewhere in the palace, the emperor walks. You can hear the faint brush of silk, the metallic clink of ornaments, the deliberate rhythm of a ruler who believes his steps can set the pulse of the empire. This is not a common dynasty. This is the late reign of a man convinced that wakefulness is power. It is the court of an emperor who believes the human mind is clearest in the hours when others are lost to dreams. The historians will tell you the facts plainly. He issued decrees that court officials must be available at all hours. He punished yawns as disrespect. He replaced night banquets with endless councils, lit by oil lamps until the wicks drowned in their own smoke. They will tell you, perhaps with a knowing smile, that he believed sleep made the empire weak. But they will not tell you the taste in your mouth when you have not rested in 3 days. They will not mention the way the air bends under exhaustion, or how words begin to feel heavy in the throat. You stand in the courtyard, head lowered. The emperor emerges. His robes shimmer in the lantern glow, patterns shifting with each step. The air smells faintly of the incense burned in his chambers, sharp, resinous, almost medicinal. His eyes pass over you, sharp but not lingering. He speaks to the ministers. His voice is slow, deliberate, as if the cold air must carry each word to the farthest corner. Tonight, he says, there will be no rest. Not for anyone. A murmur stirs in the crowd, not of protest, but of bodies adjusting, shuffling, bracing for another long stretch. Your stomach tightens. You think of the servants who will now be summoned to carry tea, fetch scrolls, trim wicks. Of the scribes whose hands will cramp under the steady scrape of the brush. Of the guards who will keep their eyes open against the pull of sleep until they blur. and every shadow begins to look like a threat. The Emperor turns away, and the line dissolves into motion. You follow the narrow walkway toward the main hall, passing the bronze braziers that glow with a heat that seems to die before it reaches your skin. Inside, the hall is vast and dim, its high beams lost in shadow. Scrolls lie open on low tables. Inkstones wait, dark and wet. A servant moves silently among the ministers, refilling cups of bitter tea. You take your seat. Your knees crack as you fold your legs under you. The Emperor begins again, speaking of border disputes, grain levies, matters of law. His voice drones, but the words are precise. You try to follow them, but your mind slips. Images from earlier, the glint of frost on the courtyard stones, the uneven hem of a guard's robe drift in uninvited. You blink hard. Somewhere, far away, a bell rings. Not the bell for rest, but the distant sound of a monastery mocking the deep night. You imagine the monks, already lying in their cells, breathing evenly, the straw under them warm from their bodies. Your head tips forward, just slightly. A cough snaps you upright. The official beside you gives a small, warning glance. The Emperor is still speaking. His eyes sweep the room, and you know that if they find yours, they will not forgive the faint redness around them. You grip the edge of the table until your knuckles ache. The lacquer is smooth, sticky with the residue of many cups of tea. Outside, the wind shifts. The lantern light trembles again. The night stretches endlessly before you, heavy and silent. You wonder not for the first time how long a body can go without sleep before something inside simply refuses to keep going. But that wasn't even the worst part. You do not remember standing. One moment you were seated at the lacquered table, hands curled around the edge. The next you were walking in slow, stiff steps toward the side corridor, following the flow of other ministers as the Emperor's council paused for tea. Your sandals whisper against the stone. The hall behind you still hums with his voice, carried on the cold air like a thread that refuses to snap. In the corridor, the light is dimmer. The brazier smoke clings here, turning the air thick, slightly sweet, slightly acrid. The scent of burnt pine resin wraps around you like a rough scarf. You do not yawn. Not here. Not where eyes might still be watching. A servant passes you, carrying a tray of clay cups. The tea within them steams faintly, but the warmth looks like a promise it cannot keep by the time it reaches the minister's hands. It will already be lukewarm. In the side chamber, the walls are closer, the ceiling lower. The faint chill of stone has been replaced by the faint damp of human breath. You take your place along the wall. No one sits. Sitting feels too close to relaxing. Relaxing feels too close to sleep. Your knees tremble. Across from you, an older minister blinks slowly, his eyes red, veined, skin the color of paper left in the sun. You have never spoken to him. You suspect he no longer remembers your name. He is swaying just enough to make you wonder if he feels the floor move beneath him. A sharp sound, a single clap, cuts the stillness. The Emperor has returned. You file back into the main hall. The brazier heat catches your skin again sudden, almost startling. You lower yourself into your place, legs folding in the same way they have folded 1,000 times before. The Emperor speaks of the northern border. He describes the rivers, the frozen passes, the caravans that will not arrive until the thaw. His words are orderly, clean, like rows of calligraphy on a perfect sheet. Yours are not. Inside your head, the sentences you hear drift apart, lose their shape, reform into images you did not summon the shadow of your blanket, the way frost collects on the eaves in tiny teeth. Your thoughts are a pond in winter. Thin ice covers the surface, and every new word from the Emperor is a pebble dropped into it, cracking the stillness just enough to send ripples under the frozen skin. You rub your eyes without thinking. A mistake. The scrape of your knuckles against the skin sounds loud in your ears. You lower your hand immediately, glancing down as though studying the grain of the table. Somewhere deep in the palace, a door closes. The sound carries faintly through the walls, a hush of wood against wood. Then the sigh of air released into the hallways, the Emperor pauses. It is not a long pause, but it is enough for everyone in the room to notice. He resumes, voice steady, but the air feels heavier now. You know the stories. In other reigns, men have been dismissed for far less than a moment's inattention. And dismissal here does not mean retirement. Outside the windows, the night is deepened. The lanterns sway in a slower rhythm, as if even the wind is growing tired. The world beyond the palace is silent, no dogs barking, no vendors calling, no carts rattling over stone. Only the long, unbroken hush of a city that sleeps while you are forbidden to. You remember your father's words years ago, before you came here. A man who fears sleep fears himself. You hadn't understood then. You understand now. Your head feels heavy again. The lacquer table is cool under your fingertips. The Emperor shifts in his seat. A long sleeve slides back from his wrist, revealing skin pale as rice paper, veins faintly blue under the lamplight. His hand rests still, perfectly still, as if even his pulse waits for permission to move. And yet, in his eyes you see the faint, unmistakable shadow of exhaustion. Not much, but enough. The thought flickers through you, he is not immune. You keep your gaze low. Your breath is shallow. The night presses on, slow as dripping wax. You wonder if anyone will be left awake when the dawn comes truly awake, not simply upright, but that is not what will break you. You keep your eyes lowered. It feels safer that way. The lacquered table reflects only the faintest shapes, the ripple of lamplight, the edge of a sleeve, the glint of a metal clasp on a scroll. The Emperor's voice flows on. It does not rise or fall. It simply moves forward, like water in a canal, steady, contained, certain of its course. Your mind tries to keep pace. It cannot. The words blur, turning into sound without meaning. A tone, a rhythm, not language, not thought. The sound lodges somewhere in the back of your skull, not demanding to be understood, just refusing to stop. The brazier nearest you spits once a faint pop, as a resin knot catches. The scent sharpens in the air, pine, with the faint bitterness of smoke that has clung too long to fabric. You shift your weight. The stone beneath the woven mat feels harder than it should, as though the night itself has made it rigid. You think of the bed you once had in your childhood home, a frame of wood your uncle had built, the mattress stuffed with husks. In summer it smelled faintly of dust and last year's harvest. In winter it smelled of nothing at all, except the warmth your body gave it. That bed has been gone for decades, burned for fuel in a lean winter. But the memory of it rises now, unbidden, because your body remembers comfort more than your mind does. A minister clears his throat 2 places to your left. It is a small sound, quickly covered by the scrape of a sleeve across the table. But you see the Emperor's eyes flick in that direction just once, just long enough for the minister's shoulders to stiffen. The council resumes its rhythm. You reach for your tea. It is lukewarm, the surface cloudy with tiny flecks from the leaves. You sip. The bitterness bites at your tongue, but the warmth, even muted, flows down into you like a promise you know will not be kept. A page enters from the far end of the hall. He bows, his movements sharp despite his youth, and hands a scroll to the chief secretary. The Emperor does not pause his speech, but you see his gaze shift to the scroll's red seal. It is a message from the eastern provinces. Your ears ring faintly. It has been hours since the drum first called you from your blanket. The ringing is not sound, it is fatigue, pressing into the edges of your senses. The secretary reads aloud. His voice is lighter than the Emperor's, but no less careful. Grain yields, river floods, the numbers of households relocated. Facts recorded in the steady hand of provincial scribes who work under oil lamps not unlike these, who will sleep when they finish and not be punished for it. When the reading ends, the Emperor finally rises. It is a slow movement, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The silk of his robe sighs against itself. The ornaments at his waist sway, catching the lamplight in brief, dull glints. We will deliberate, he says. And then, almost too quietly to be called an order, he adds, no one will leave the hall. The words settle over you like a second layer of cold. There will be no recess. A servant moves to the door, sliding it shut with a soft finality. The latch clicks into place. The air feels heavier. It is an old truth in this court. The emperor's endurance is the measure by which all must endure. If he chooses to remain standing, you will remain seated. If he speaks for another hour, you will listen for another hour. If he stands until the first light touches the eaves, you will still be here, eyes open, breath measured, body refusing to betray you. Your fingers rest against the rim of your teacup. The clay is cool now. The emperor begins to pace. His hands are hidden in the folds of his sleeves, his head slightly lowered as though studying the floor. His voice no longer carries to the farthest corners. It has softened, grown more conversational, but every word still holds the weight of authority. He speaks of vigilance, of the need to outlast the enemy not only in the field but in the mind. He speaks of history dynasties that collapsed not from hunger or invasion, but from what he calls the slow rot of indulgence. And then, almost with a trace of disdain, he says, "Sleep is the oldest indulgence." The ministers murmur faintly, not in agreement or protest, but in the low sound of acknowledgement that is safest in this hall. You think of farmers in the provinces, lying under the thatch after a day in the fields, their breathing heavy with the weariness of honest labor. You think of the market sellers curling around their earnings at night, the guards at the city gates leaning against the wall when their replacements arrive. You think of the quiet simplicity of rest, the small mercy it gives even the poorest. The emperor speaks as though such things are foreign to him. Perhaps they are. The hours slide past, measured only by the slow dimming of the oil lamps. One wick sputters, then dies, leaving a shadow in the far right corner of the hall. No one moves to replace it. Your own shadow bends oddly against the wall now, its shape warped by the shifting light. You study it because it is easier than meeting the emperor's eyes. The air is dry in your mouth. You swallow, and the sound seems loud to you. Your vision sharpens in bursts, then blurs again. You are not sure if it is from staring too long or from the constant fight to remain still. A faint tapping draws your attention, the older minister across from you, his fingers twitching against the table in an unconscious rhythm. Not rebellion, not defiance, just a small, involuntary admission that the body will not always obey. The emperor turns toward him. The tapping stops. Silence. The only sound is the faint hiss of the braziers and the slow rustle of the emperor's robes as he moves again. Your eyes drift toward the high windows. They are dark, the night outside still holding firm, no hint of dawn yet. Somewhere deep within yourself, you try to remember the feel of lying down without fear, the way your muscles would soften in stages, the way your breath would slow without command. You try to recall the drifting point, that gentle slide into sleep, but the memory feels frayed, incomplete, as though it belongs to another life entirely. The emperor stops pacing. "We will reconvene at dawn," he says. Your stomach drops, not because dawn is near, but because it is not. There are still hours left. A guard opens the side door. The cold rushes in like water into a dry vessel. The shock of it wakes you just enough to stand without swaying. You file into a smaller adjoining room not to rest, but to review the scrolls just discussed. The ministers cluster around low tables. Servants bring more tea, its steam rising in faint, uncertain spirals. Your fingers tremble as you unroll a document. The characters swim for a moment before settling into clarity. You read them aloud to the man beside you, your voice quiet but steady. It feels almost like normal work, until your vision doubles again, and you have to blink hard to hold the lines in place. The night is far from over. You wonder, with a small, dangerous thought, whether the emperor himself truly stays awake in these hours, or whether there is a private chamber, warm and silent, where he rests for even a short time. You have never seen it. You have never heard anyone speak of it, and yet the shadow in his eyes earlier. It lingers in your mind. Perhaps he is mortal after all. The scroll slips slightly in your hands. You steady it. The man beside you notices, but says nothing. The brazier in this room burns lower, the embers deep red, like the last traces of a sunset that refuses to leave. Somewhere in the palace, another drum sounds not the morning drum, but the one that marks the passing of another watch in the night. Its echo feels like a reminder, a whisper, you are still here, still awake. Still caught in the decree of a man who fears the thing every other living being seeks without command. You breathe in. The air tastes faintly of ash and old tea. You breathe out. The breath feels heavier than it should. The hours will not end on their own. Someone must carry them to daylight. You are not sure if you will be one of those who make it that far. But that is something you will only learn when the sky begins to change. You wake before the drum. That alone feels wrong. For months now, the palace's rhythm has been shaped by the iron certainty of sound, the night drum, marking the hour when even thought should fall silent. The morning drum demanding that your body rise before it is ready. Yet now, the air is too still, no echo of leather striking wood. It is not peace. It is the sound of something waiting. The silk curtain by your bed stirs slightly, though no wind enters the room. You push it aside and see the corridor beyond bathed in a steady golden glow. The lantern at the far end, the one the night watch tends, burns brighter than usual. And then you realize it is not the same lantern. The usual lamp is small, its flame barely licking the rim, good enough for a guard to find his footing. But this one is a great copper vessel, carved with swirling clouds and dragons, its glass painted red. The flame inside does not flicker. It roars quietly, as if fed not by oil, but by something it intends to consume forever. You rise, wincing at the ache in your knees. Your legs carry the weight of nights spent standing when you should have been lying down. Nights of walking circles to keep yourself from falling asleep in the Emperor's presence. The corridor smells faintly of sandalwood and something sharper resin. Perhaps the scent priests burn at funerals to mask the smell of the dead. It is wrong here, where there is no body. Not yet. 2 eunuchs stand near the lantern, their faces pale in the glow. Neither blinks. Their stillness is more disturbing than the strange light. One of them finally speaks. The Emperor says this flame will never go out. You wait for the explanation. None comes. Instead, the eunuchs look past you, into the darkness of your chamber, as though they expect something or someone to emerge. When nothing does, they return their gaze to the lantern, as if guarding it is more important than breathing. At breakfast, if one can call a single bowl of rice at the 4th hour of the morning breakfast, the news spreads quietly among the lesser servants. The lantern has been placed in every corridor leading to the Emperor's chambers. They are not allowed to be extinguished. Some whisper that it is a sign of protection, an ancient charm to ward off evil spirits. Others say the Emperor fears assassins and believes the light will rob them of shadows to hide in. You know better. The Emperor's war is not with the living. It is with the night itself, and now he has decided that night will have no place in his halls. The effect is immediate. Before, at least, you could trick your mind into rest when the lamps dimmed and the silence of the palace deepened. But now, even with your eyes closed, you can feel the heat of the copper lanterns, smell the burning resin, hear the faint spit of oil feeding the flames. Sleep is no longer a risk to be resisted. It is a crime the light will catch you committing. You see it in the other servants. One spills tea onto the lacquered floor and stares at it, as though unsure what the liquid is. Another forgets the order of ceremonial bowing and freezes in place until a senior courtier yanks him back into motion. Your own body betrays you. A jug feels heavier than it should. Steps feel longer. You stand in the middle of a room and forget why you entered. The Emperor does not notice, or perhaps he does and considers it victory. One night, as you are sent to deliver a scroll to the archivist, you pass through a side corridor lined with these unblinking lanterns. You pause to stretch your aching back and realize you are not alone. An older scribe sits on the floor beside one of the lanterns, knees tucked to his chest, chin resting on them. His eyes are open but glassy. You should be in your quarters, you murmur. He turns his head slowly, as though the movement costs him more than it should. Can't, he whispers. Light keeps talking. You think you misheard, but his cracked lips repeat it. It says to stay awake, says it will see me if I close my eyes, says. His voice trails off, his eyes fix again on the steady flame. You do not wait to hear more. Days blur. Nights stretch until they feel like another form of day, only sharper, more brittle. The emperor begins holding audiences at hours once reserved for sleep. Petitioners come with trembling voices and vacant stares, but still they bow, still they speak. The physicians are the first to crack. One collapses mid-sentence while advising the emperor on herbal tonics for alertness. He is carried away, and by morning his position is filled by another man whose hands shake as he prepares the same bitter brew. You hear that the first physician has been sent to a place of rest. The phrasing makes your stomach tighten. In the palace, such words mean exile at best. One evening, though evening has no meaning here anymore, you are ordered to remain outside the emperor's private study, while a scroll is read aloud to him. The voice inside is hoarse, stumbling over certain phrases, but the emperor's interruptions are crisp. How can an emperor command an army? He says, if the army rests. The reader murmurs something you cannot catch. How can a realm remain safe? The emperor continues, if its rulers allow their minds to sink into the nothingness of dreams. A pause. Then his tone hardens, you cannot defend in sleep. You cannot build in sleep. You cannot rule in sleep. The voice of the reader grows fainter. Perhaps he is bowing, perhaps collapsing. And then, with an edge that cuts even through the closed doors, I will see how long the body can endure without surrender. You realize your hands have clenched into fists. You force them open before a guard notices. That night, the palace smells thicker than ever of sandalwood and burning resin. The air feels warm against your skin, though it is the coldest month of the year. You pass the great copper lantern outside your own quarters and see your reflection in its curved glass. Your eyes are ringed with bruised shadows. Your lips are cracked. Your cheeks are hollower than you remember. When you lie down, the light still burns against your closed eyelids, turning the dark into a dull, pulsing red. You think of the old scribe, sitting on the floor, whispering to the flame. You wonder when you will start hearing it too. Morning or what passes, for it comes with no change in light. You wake with the same heat on your skin, the same sharp scent in your nose. But there is something else. In the courtyard, a lantern has fallen. Its glass lies shattered across the flagstones, and the copper frame is bent. The flame has been smothered. 3 guards stand around it, their faces tight. One of them holds a small wooden bucket, still dripping. You glance upward. The balconies above are empty. No one claims to have seen what happened. But as you turn away, you hear a low murmur from another servant. Maybe the knight wants to come back. Later, as you pour tea for a visiting court official, you notice that his hands tremble as much as yours. He meets your gaze and gives the faintest shake of his head not at you, but at the state of things. For the first time in weeks, you feel the smallest spark of something unfamiliar. Not hope exactly, but the awareness that the Emperor's war may have enemies he cannot see, and perhaps they are already awake. But that is a story for tomorrow night. You stumble out of the hall of eternal wakefulness, your vision a pale smear of light and shadow. The lamps behind you still flicker, the smoke curling toward the painted rafters like the tired hands of a ghost. Somewhere deep inside your skull, a drum is beating slow, heavy, merciless, and you realize it's your own pulse, thudding against the bones of your head. The corridor is long and cold, its tiles breathing faint whispers beneath your feet. Servants ahead of you walk in silence, their shadows stretched thin on the lacquered walls. The sound of silk sleeves brushing together is louder than speech. You clutch your robe tighter, not because of the cold, though the stone floor has a way of pulling warmth out of you, but because you feel as if your own body is trying to loosen, to fall apart at the seams. The Emperor's orders had been clear tonight. No one leaves their post until the morning drums. Morning, you don't even remember what morning looks like anymore. The nights have blurred together, becoming one endless black cloth. Somewhere ahead, a bronze door groans open. The faint smell of ink and sandalwood drifts toward you. You glance in as you pass. It is the scribe's room. Inside, a dozen men sit, hunched over long, low tables, their hands shaking as they copy down imperial decrees under candlelight. The wax pools overflows and hardens on the wooden floor in strange, translucent petals. One man blinks too long, his brush sliding a crooked stroke into the Emperor's name. He freezes, his breath caught. Then, without a word, he takes a razor blade from the table, slices the paper clean, and begins again. No one looks at him. They are all too afraid to see another man fail. You pass on, the corridor curving toward the servants' quarters. But before you reach them, you hear it, the sound of soft weeping. You stop. It comes from the darkened alcove where the laundry girls work. Pushing the bead curtain aside, you see 3 young women crouched over steaming basins, scrubbing robes with red, swollen hands. Their eyes are rimmed with pink, the skin beneath them thin as parchment. One of them, barely more than a child, is biting her lip so hard you fear she'll draw blood. She rubs at a stain that isn't there, her body rocking slightly. You step forward and whisper, "Go rest, just for a little while." She shakes her head without looking up. "If the watcher finds us idle, we'll be sent to the punishment bench." The punishment bench, a wooden plank set beneath the cold water spout in the courtyard. Those who nodded off in the Emperor's palace sat there for hours while water dripped onto their skulls, each drop finding the same spot, over and over, until the mind felt split in two. You say nothing more. You leave them there, their pale hands moving in the hot water like ghost fish. When you finally reach your own quarters, it's not the relief you imagined. The room is a narrow rectangle of air and darkness, its one window nailed shut to keep out the night wind. You light a single candle. The flame wavers as if even it wishes to lie down. On the small table is a folded scrap of paper, the day's meal tally. It lists a bowl of rice, a pinch of salted plum, and a sip of bitter tea. You cannot remember eating them. Perhaps you swallowed them without taste in some earlier half-waking hour. You sit on the mat, head in hands. Your body wants to fall sideways, to give in to the heaviness pressing at your ribs. But the Emperor's guards roam the corridors at all hours, looking for signs of disobedience, closed eyes, slack faces, bodies leaning against the wall. And so you do what you have done every night. You hum quietly to yourself, not for comfort, but to keep the sound in your ears so the silence does not turn into sleep. Time loses shape. It might have been minutes or hours later when a knock comes. Too soft to be the guards. You slide open the door to find May, the herbalist's daughter, who serves in the kitchens. Her face is pale, her lips tight. She pushes a small porcelain cup into your hands. "Drink this," she whispers. The liquid inside is dark green, flecked with crushed leaves. "What is it?" You ask. "Wild tea from the southern hills, strong enough to keep the mind moving even when the body wants to stop. My father used to drink it during the harvest nights." You hesitate. The Emperor has forbidden unsanctioned stimulants. Only his personal brews are permitted, and those are given in precise doses by his own physicians. But you think of the laundry girls shaking hands, the scribe's crooked stroke, the endless, cold corridor. You drink. It is bitter as bark, the taste curling into your throat and refusing to leave. But almost instantly, a faint clarity threads through your skull. Your eyelids feel less like stone. May's eyes glint in the candlelight. "If you tell anyone, I'll be sent away." You nod. "I will tell no one." She leaves as quietly as she came. Outside, a faint bell rings, not the morning drums, but the bell of the night inspectors. You know what it means. The Emperor has decided to walk the palace again. You must return to the hall of eternal wakefulness. Your legs protest as you rise. You wrap your robe tighter, step into the corridor, and join the slow, moving current of servants headed back toward the great hall. By the time you enter, the Emperor is already there. His robe tonight is black, embroidered with a river of gold, threaded dragons winding from hem to collar. His eyes are bright, too bright, as if they have never once known the weight of a closing lid. He paces before the assembled court. "Tonight," he says, "we will read from the records of the ancestors until the lamps burn low." A groan almost escapes you. The records are endless. their words dry as dust, and the reader, a thin, trembling man, drones in a voice like wind over stone. As the hours drag on, the bitter tea battles with the pull of exhaustion. Your mind flickers between moments of sharp awareness and swells of dark, dreamlike haze. Once you think you see the Emperor glance at you not in suspicion, but in something like curiosity, as if he wonders how much longer his people can stand before they fall. And then, suddenly, the reader falters. His voice stops. You look up to see his head dipping forward. The court freezes. A guard steps forward, places a hand on the reader's shoulder, and shakes him sharply. The man blinks, mutters an apology, and tries to continue, but it's too late. The Emperor has already raised his hand. Remove him, he says softly. Two guards seize the reader by the arms and drag him toward the courtyard. The doors close behind them. The sound of the hall seems thinner without his voice. You feel the tea wearing off. Your hands twitch in your sleeves. Somewhere in the palace, water begins to drip. And you wonder not for the first time how much longer you can stand before you too are taken to the bench. The courtyard feels wrong. It isn't just the hour, some shapeless time between one watch and the next, but the way the light sits on everything. The palace lanterns, each tall as a man and painted with curling dragons, burn with an oily, persistent flame that refuses to gutter. Even when the wind slides between the columns, carrying the cool scent of rain, soaked stone, the wicks only shiver but never dim. You stand there longer than you should, your feet aching from hours of forced attendance, watching the flames. They make the courtyard look frozen, the shadows locked into their angles, the guards locked into their stances. The Emperor had ordered that none of the lanterns in the inner court ever be allowed to go out. It was symbolic, he said. Sleep was darkness, wakefulness was light, and so the palace had been turned into a place where darkness was banished, except in the minds and hearts of those living inside it. Your eyes ache in a way no candle could explain. A serving boy, younger than some of the chickens kept for the kitchen shuffles, passed carrying a fresh jar of oil. His steps are heavy, his hair sticking to his face, his lower lip swollen from where he's been chewing it to stay awake. He doesn't even notice you. He tips the jar into the nearest lantern, splashing the metal frame, then trudges on toward the next one, endlessly circling. Somewhere in the west wing, you hear the sharp cough of a court musician who's been made to play since sunset. The sound rings out like a mistake in an otherwise perfect performance, but no one corrects it. The Emperor wants music at all hours now, thin, high, pitched melodies to keep the mind alert. It works in a way. It's impossible to rest with a bamboo flute drilling notes into your skull. Your own duties tonight are unclear. No one has told you where you should be, and yet, somehow, you feel as though someone is always watching. You wander the covered walkways, past screens painted with tigers leap, past carved stone lions whose eyes seem sharper under lantern light. The air smells faintly of camphor and ink. The Emperor's own writing chamber lies somewhere ahead. His newest obsession is with scrolls recording the progress of the sleepless court. He has scribes working in shifts, writing down which ministers falter, which guards slump, which concubines yawn. You think of the list with unease. Halfway down the corridor you glimpse him. Not the Emperor, but the man everyone calls the shadow of the throne. He stands where two hallways cross, draped in the long dark robes of an advisor, though you've never heard him speak in open court. His hands are clasped behind his back, his head bowed slightly, but you can feel his attention fixed on you even from this distance. When you blink, he is gone. You press on, telling yourself you imagined it. The Hall of Unending Records is lit brighter than the rest of the palace. 30 lanterns, each the height of your waist, throw gold light over row upon row of low desks. At each desk, a scribe scratches away with brush and ink, their heads bent, eyes rimmed red. The air is thick with the smell of drying ink and fatigue. A few have tied strips of cloth around their foreheads to keep from nodding forward into their own writing. You linger at the doorway. One of the scribes looks up at you, his expression soft and desperate, as though you might be the one to free him from this place. His lips move soundlessly. You can't tell if he's mouthing a prayer or your name. Before you can step closer, the overseer, a pale man with a voice like cracking porcelain, walks down the row, rapping a bamboo rod against any desk where the brush slows. The desperate-eyed scribe jerks upright, the moment gone. You slip away before the overseer notices you. Back in the outer court, the rain begins not in sudden drops, but in a fine mist that clings to your hair and skin. It makes the lantern flames hiss faintly, though none go out. The guards on the wall barely move. You realize now that they've been ordered not to pace. Pacing might tire them more quickly. Instead, they stand in fixed positions, shifting their weight imperceptibly, waiting for morning that will not bring rest. You stop under the eaves and watch the water bead on your sleeve. It is strangely beautiful, this palace of light and mist, but it feels like beauty stolen from something living. And then footsteps. Not hurried, but deliberate. You glance toward the sound and see a figure you recognize, the old physician. His beard is damp with rain, his robe wrinkled in a way no court attire should be. He stops before you, eyes tired but sharp. "You'll need this," he says, pressing a small paper packet into your palm. Inside, you can feel the coarse texture of dried leaves. You know them bitter tea from the southern provinces, steeped not for taste, but for its sharp, shaking wakefulness. "They'll search you if they think you've found a way to endure." He adds quietly, "Hide it." You want to ask why he's helping you, why he hasn't given it to others, but he is already gone, swallowed by the rain and the endless glow of lantern light. Later, in your small sleeping chamber, a name that has become a cruel joke, you sit on the wooden bench and unwrap the packet. The smell hits you immediately, earthy, astringent, the kind of scent that scrapes the inside of your nose. You tuck it into a hollow beneath the floorboard, heart pounding as though you've just committed treason. Through the thin wall, you hear muffled voices, two eunuchs whispering about the emperor's next decree. One says he plans to extend the ban on sleep beyond the palace. All of the capital will be ordered to keep lanterns burning, music playing, eyes open. The other laughs in disbelief, but the laugh dies quickly. You lie back, staring at the ceiling. The wood above you glows faintly with the light of the lantern outside. Even here, behind closed doors, the palace feels awake, alert, breathing in shallow, sleepless gasps. You try closing your eyes, just for a moment. A single note from a distant flute pierces the silence. You open them again. By the time dawn's gray light leaks into the sky, you are no less tired than when the night began. The palace does not change with daybreak. The lanterns stay lit. The music keeps playing. The scribes keep writing. Only the sky beyond the walls reminds you that time still moves forward. Somewhere deep in the inner halls, the emperor is stirring from his meditation, not waking, because he never truly sleeps. Soon he will appear again, and the day will stretch ahead like a second night. You wonder, not for the first time, how long a human body can endure this. You walk through the corridor with the decree clutched in both hands, as if it were a living thing that might bite you. The wax seal is still warm from the imperial press, its dragon emblem catching the faint torchlight in a deep, blood-red sheen. Outside, the wind sighs through the open lattice windows, carrying with it the dry scent of the palace garden's sandal, wood from the night, pruned trees, and the faint sweetness of plum blossoms that have bloomed too early, tricked by the strange warmth of this sleepless season. Your footsteps echo in the long, narrow hallway. The sound feels too loud, so you shorten your stride, taking smaller steps, as if that might make you less visible. The Hall of Records sits far on the western side of the palace, an old wing built during the reign of an emperor long dead, when paper was rarer than silver and scrolls were guarded more tightly than gold. You have been there only twice before, both times during daylight. At night, the approach feels different. The lacquered pillars rise from the shadows like black trees, their gold filigree dulled to a tarnished brown by the flickering torches. The carved beasts at their bases, lions, tigers, killins, seem to watch you as you pass. You round the final corner, and there it is, the great wooden doors of the Hall of Records, each one taller than 3 men. bound with iron so dark it swallows the firelight. 2 guards stand on either side, swaying slightly in their armor. Their eyes are red, rimmed, lids fluttering, the skin beneath them bruised with sleepless purple shadows. One lifts his spear in the slow, uncertain manner of a man whose body is about to betray him. "State your business," he mumbles, though his voice cracks halfway through the words. You bow low, holding up the scroll. An imperial decree. It must be entered into the archives before dawn. The guard on the left squints at you for a moment, or perhaps he's trying to keep both eyes open, then jerks his chin at his partner. The other stumbles forward, knocks once on the heavy door, and a small side panel slides open. A narrow, pale face peers out from within. It belongs to a clerk, thin as a reed, his hair tied in a loose knot, quill tucked behind one ear. His gaze darts to the scroll in your hands, and his expression changes not surprise, exactly, but something like recognition. He unlatches the side door and steps aside. Inside, the hall of records smells of old bamboo paper and the faint, bitter tang of ink. The air is cooler here, almost damp. Racks of scrolls stretch away into the shadows, row after row, each bundle marked with a strip of silk in shades of faded crimson or ochre. The silence is deep enough that you can hear the faint scratch of a quill somewhere in the darkness. The clerk gestures for you to follow. His robes brush the floor as he moves, whispering like dry leaves. "This way," he says quietly, leading you past the main archive room toward a smaller chamber in the back. Imperial decrees are stored in the inner vault. Only a handful of us have the keys. You pass a table where another clerk sits copying a military roster by candlelight. The man's head droops dangerously close to the flame, and you wonder if he'll set his sleeve alight before the night ends. But he jerks awake at the sound of your footsteps and pretends to be deep in his work. The inner chamber is smaller, the shelves here holding only the most recent edicts, the ones that shape life in the Empire before they become history. The clerk stops before an open desk, takes the scroll from your hands, and studies the seal without breaking it. You know what this says. He asks, voice still low. You shake your head. You have not dared to read it. He sets the scroll on the desk and carefully cracks the seal. The parchment unfurls with a soft rustle, the black ink still glistening under the lamplight. His eyes move quickly across the lines, and you watch his expression grow more pinched. Finally he looks up. It orders the expansion of the no-sleep decree. He says, "Not just the court, not just the city guard, every household in the capital will be required to keep a lamp burning all night. Any home found dark after midnight will be fined. Repeat offenders will." He hesitates. "Will lose one family member to imperial service." The words hang in the air like a weight pressing on your chest. The clerk rolls the scroll back up, ties it with a strip of black silk, and slips it into a pigeonhole marked with a fresh white tag. He does it with the same calm precision one might use to store a weather report, but you can see the slight tremor in his fingers. You realize what this means: merchants, farmers, street sweepers, children. None of them will be spared the Emperor's new obsession. When you leave the Hall of Records, the night air feels heavier than before. Somewhere in the distance, a drum beats 3 slow notes, the signal for the next watch. The sound makes you think of a heartbeat that has slowed almost to stopping. You pass through the western courtyard, where a gardener in plain gray robes is watering the potted pines. He glances at you without speaking, his eyes dull with exhaustion, the water sloshing over the rim of his jug because his arms no longer obey him perfectly. Back in your narrow quarters, you do not light your own lamp. You simply sit in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the palace that never sleeps, and you wonder, how much longer before even the strongest will break? You do not remember unfolding the Emperor's order. Perhaps your hands did it by instinct. Perhaps the parchment unfolded itself. But now it lies before you, and even through the blur of your tired eyes, you can see that the words carved in ink are sharp enough to cut. The room sways with torchlight, the shadows of shelves and scroll, cases bending in and out like slow breathing. The clerks around you are not speaking. A cough here, a sigh there, but mostly the heavy, Awful silence of men and women who have been awake too long to even whisper. You read the first line. It is not what you expected. The decree is not about taxes. It is not about war. It is not even a new rule to prevent the people from sleeping. No, it is something worse. The emperor is demanding a full registry of everyone who has been caught sleeping since the decree began, including names, family members, addresses, and punishments already carried out, and beneath that an order for further action that the ink does not fully explain. Your hands tighten around the parchment. The paper makes a dry, cracking sound like frost breaking. The chief clerk, a thin, bald man with an ink stain on his cheek, steps forward from behind the desk. "You'll deliver it to the Western Tower," he murmurs, voice rasping as though unused for days. "Captain of the Silent Guard awaits." The Silent Guard, that is not a name to hear at night. You have only seen them twice. Once, when a noble family was dragged from their estate for speaking against the emperor. Once, when a cook from the palace kitchens was caught sleeping under the table. Both times, the Silent Guard did not shout or curse or strike. They simply bound the offenders in white cloth, carried them away, and never returned them. You want to refuse. Your mouth opens, but the chief clerk has already turned back to his desk, his quill scratching across another sheet as though you no longer exist. The hallways outside the Hall of Records are colder now. Not the honest cold of winter air, but a deep, creeping chill that belongs to stone that has seen too much night. Your sandals tap faintly against the floor. The sound echoes two far down corridors that are supposed to be empty. Halfway to the Western Tower, you pass a window slit. The world beyond is darkness. Not the comfortable kind that hides sleeping villages and dreaming fields, but the heavy, watchful darkness of an empire that has forgotten how to rest. Far below, you see the torchlight of patrols moving along the outer wall. Their movements are strange, abrupt, then slow, as though their bodies have forgotten the rhythm of walking. The Western Tower door stands half open. Inside, no torches burn. Only a single brazier glows in the center, the coals breathing red light into the chamber. The captain of the Silent Guard sits cross-legged beside it, his armor black and without a single emblem. His face is pale in the firelight, the eyes sunk deep into hollows, the lips pressed flat. "You have it," he asks, not looking at you. You step forward and hand him the scroll. His hands gloved, but not armored, take it with care. He reads. You cannot see his eyes move, but you know he is taking in every word. When he finishes, he rolls it again, tighter than before, and tucks it into a black leather case. Then he looks at you for the first time. "Go back the way you came," he says softly. "If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Your throat is dry." You nod, bow slightly, and turn toward the door. The corridor outside feels longer now. At first you walk quickly, just as he said, but soon you hear it the faintest shuffle, too slow to be a normal step, too deliberate to be the wind. You do not turn. Your neck aches with the effort of keeping your head forward. Somewhere behind you, fabric whispers. The air seems to close in. You pass the window slit again. This time, the patrol below has stopped. Every guard stands perfectly still, their torches burning low. By the time you return to the Hall of Records, the clerks are gone. Only the chief clerk remains, seated at his desk, eyes fixed on a blank sheet of parchment. Without looking up, he says, "The Silent Guard will take care of the rest." You want to ask what the rest means, but you already know you will not like the answer. So you leave. The servants' quarters are quieter tonight. Not because anyone is sleeping, they are not allowed to, but because voices have grown thin from lack of use. Men and women sit in corners, eyes glassy, hands moving slowly over simple tasks. Mending a robe, polishing a cup, folding and unfolding cloth without purpose. You find your corner and sit down. Your body is shaking now, not from fear, but from exhaustion so deep it feels like illness. Somewhere in the palace, a bell chimes. Not the hour bell, this one is softer, lower, and it sounds only once. It is the kind of sound that says something has ended, or that something has begun. You keep your eyes open, not because you want to, but because you no longer know what will happen if you close them. And you wonder, how many more names will be added to the Emperor's list before this endless night is over? The night air tastes like metal. You can feel it clinging to the back of your throat as you step away from the Hall of Records. The Emperor's decree now no longer in your possession, but etched into your mind like a burned scar. The courtyard stretches before you wide, pale, and rimmed with the black shapes of cypress trees, their needled branches quivering in the faint wind. Above them the sky is awash, stout smear of gray, not quite moonlit, not quite dark the hour between midnight and dawn, when even the stars seem too tired to shine. Your own steps drag. You tell yourself it is the weight of the duty you've just performed carrying the Emperor's will into the bureaucratic veins of the palace. But deep down you know it is something else. That same clawing exhaustion you have learned to ignore for nights on end is now growing bolder, gnawing at the edge of your consciousness like a rat beneath a floorboard. The clack of your wooden, soled shoes echoes through the empty flagstones until another sound interrupts a distant rhythm. Muffled but steady, drums, slow measured, the sound of ceremony. You follow the noise down a colonnaded walkway. The air thickens with incense before you see them, a line of figures dressed in pale, loose robes, each carrying a long red lantern that sways with their faltering steps. Their heads tilt forward, the flames dance in patterns made erratic by uneven walking. This is no ordinary procession. You recognize the embroidered sigils on their sleeves, the mark of the night sentinels, the Emperor's personal guard of wakefulness enforcers. They are tasked not with protecting his body, but with ensuring the realm's obedience to his most recent command. No one may sleep before dawn. They are heading toward the central square of the palace, where the sleepless assembly is held. Your stomach turns. The assembly is not a gathering anyone attends willingly, not servants, not ministers, not even princes. It is where the Emperor walks among his subjects in the dead of night to see who is still awake, and where anyone caught yawning or slumping too far into stillness is made into a public lesson. You slip into the shadows at the edge of the courtyard and watch. The lantern light stains the cypress trunk's blood, red as the procession nears the square. In the center, low wooden benches ring an open space where a brazier burns high and hungry. You know the heat is deceptive. The night air bites at the ankles of those sitting in its glow. One by one, more figures arrive, clerks, still in ink-stained robes, cooks with their aprons tied over bare chests, guards with helmets crooked on their heads. Their faces are pale with fatigue. Some carry their own lanterns, others clutch mugs of bitter tea, but all of them share the same glassy, almost feverish eyes. Then a ripple in the air. The Emperor. He emerges from the northern portico, not in his golden court garb, but in a plain black robe, cinched at the waist with silver thread. His hair is bound high, the crown absent, yet there is no mistaking the sharp geometry of his posture, the unnerving brightness of his eyes. They are the eyes of a man untouched by sleep, not for one night, not for 10, but for weeks. You've heard whispers of his methods, herbal draughts brewed with powdered jade, the rhythmic drumming that never ceases in his chambers, the constant recitation of edicts to keep his mind in motion. He looks over the assembly, and it is as if the night itself holds its breath. A woman in the front row sways. You recognize her, an older scribe from the Hall of Records. Her chin dips forward for less than a heartbeat before she jerks upright again, but it is too late. The Emperor's gaze lands on her. No word passes his lips. He merely tilts his head toward one of the night sentinels. The guard steps forward, lantern light flashing across the steel of his halberd. The woman is lifted from her bench and guided not roughly, but with a firmness that leaves no question toward the brazier. She kneels. The guard takes her lantern and lowers it into the fire. It catches instantly, flames roaring high before collapsing into embers. The crowd watches in total silence, There is no public beating, no raised voice, only the slow burn of that lantern, a warning visible to every sleepless soul in the square. You feel a shiver creep along your spine. This is how the emperor enforces his rule, not through spectacle, but through the quiet certainty that he sees everything. The assembly drags on. Ministers drone reports of harvest quotas and border patrols. Musicians play thin, high melodies to fill the gaps. Somewhere in the second hour, a page collapses forward, face striking the table. The sound rings loud as a dropped gong. Again, the emperor gestures. This time, the boy is carried away entirely. You do not see where. By the time the meeting ends, dawn is threatening the horizon. The emperor dismisses the crowd with a brief nod, then disappears back into the northern portico. His guards follow, their lanterns dimming against the slow return of day. The square empties. You stand very still, your legs stiff from crouching in the shadows. The thought presses heavy in your skull. How much longer can this go on? Not for the emperor, he has the wealth, the herbs, the discipline to force himself awake, but for the rest of the empire. For the farmers whose plow hands shake from exhaustion, for the mothers rocking crying infants under moonlight, for the scribes whose ink blurs into unreadable stains. A temple bell chimes from somewhere beyond the palace walls, not the deep, rolling tone of a morning call, but a short, sharp note. The signal for inspection. Your stomach sinks. You have not yet slept, and the day is already beginning. But that is a story for tomorrow night. The courtyard is brighter than the day you remember from childhood, not because of the sun that has long fled, but because the emperor's lanterns have multiplied again. Once, there were perhaps 20, hung modestly around the perimeter. Now there are hundreds, swaying from iron hooks, clustered on wooden poles, dangling from tree branches that have been stripped bare of leaves, so no shadows might hide. Each one burns with precious oil brought from the southern province's shipments that once scented the baths of noble women, now devoured by the emperor's hatred of darkness. The air is thick with the smell, sharp, almost floral, yet faintly rancid from overuse. It coats your tongue as you breathe. You cross the stone tiles slowly because you know the rule. No servant shall pass through the lantern courtyard faster than a walking pace at night, lest the emperor suspect you are fleeing sleep. A line of guards stands along the central path. Their heads droop. Every few breaths one of them jerks awake, nearly dropping his spear. The iron tips scrape faintly against the tiles. You hear no other sounds except for the ever-present hiss of the flames. You think of the first time you were brought here. You had been 12, clutching a tray of tea so tightly your knuckles whitened. Then the courtyard had been peaceful, almost serene, a place where courtiers strolled in moonlight. Now it is an open-air furnace, light pressing against you from all sides. You pass the first checkpoint. A captain in lacquered armor squints at you, not with suspicion, but the glassy stare of a man whose mind is wandering into dreams he is forbidden to have. He forces his eyelids wide and waves you through. The drums roll again from the far end of the courtyard, where the gate of the sleepless throne stands open. Inside, you know, the emperor waits. The sleepless throne hall, the hall's pillars are wrapped in silk banners stitched with golden suns. No moons are allowed in the emperor's imagery now. He has had them removed from every tapestry, every porcelain plate, even from the painted folding screens. The floor is polished to such a shine that the lantern light makes it appear molten. Every step you take seems to splash brightness under your feet. At the far end, the emperor sits upon a throne that seems to have grown taller since you last saw it. Or perhaps he himself has shrunk. There is a gauntness to his cheeks now, a faint tremor in the hand that rests on the dragon-shaped armrest. Around him stand ministers, scribes, and eunuchs, all swaying imperceptibly, their eyes rimmed red. The court physician is here too, though you suspect his role is less to heal than to watch for signs of forbidden drowsiness. The emperor raises his head when you approach, and for a moment his gaze sharpens. "You were in the Hall of Records last night," he says. His voice is clear, but there's a rasp at the edges now. Did the decree reach every province? You bow, yes, your majesty. The clerks dispatched copies to every governor before the second drum. A thin smile tugs at his lips. Good. By the first frost, no one under heaven will dare to close their eyes without my leave. The new inspection he gestures for the captain of guards to step forward. Bring in the offenders. From the shadows near the hall's side doors, 4 prisoners are dragged forward. They are palace attendants. You recognize one of them, a boy barely 15, who once helped you carry robes to the laundry. His head lolls forward, his eyes half shut. The emperor leans down slightly. This one fell asleep beside the incense brazier in the west corridor. He says, almost conversationally, the others were caught leaning against pillars when they should have been standing. You watch as the court scribes unfurl bamboo slips and record the names. Punishment will follow, but not execution. The emperor prefers creative penalties, kneeling for 3 days without food, carrying lanterns from dusk to dawn, or chanting the hymn to the sun until the voice breaks. The boy glances at you as he's pulled away. There's no accusation in his gaze, only the slow, confused sorrow of someone too tired to resist anything. Whispered warnings as the prisoners are taken. The minister of grain leans subtly toward you. His voice is barely a thread of sound. They say the people in the outer districts are rioting. He murmurs, mothers cannot quiet their children. Fields lie untended. The sleep ban is unnatural. You keep your eyes fixed forward. You speak dangerously. He straightens. Then perhaps we are all dangerous simply by living. The emperor does not notice the exchange, or perhaps he pretends not to. He is busy dictating a new schedule, inspections every 2 hours through the night, beginning in the lantern courtyard, then the barracks, then the kitchens. No one is excused. The walk back when you are dismissed, you step once again into the lantern courtyard. The heat from the lamps feels stronger now. The guards at the gates are shaking outright, their spears vibrating faintly. One of them stumbles as you pass, catching himself just before his knees touch the ground. Beyond the courtyard, the palace corridors stretch away in blinding light. You know there will be no shadows here until morning, and morning itself no longer feels like an end. Only the briefest pause before another night, just like this one. You wonder how long the emperor can keep this up before his own body betrays him. But you also wonder uneasily how long yours can last. But that is a story for tomorrow night. The moon is up, but no one dares look at it. Its pale glow rests on the roof tiles of the inner palace, tracing each curved edge in silver. In another lifetime, servants might have whispered that this was an auspicious night. In another lifetime, you might have been asleep by now. But here, under the emperor's new decree, the palace has no midnight anymore, only an endless stretch of time, lit by torches that hiss softly as they burn through their oil. You stand in a shadowed corridor, watching the movement of people who should not be moving. Eunuchs in heavy silk robes glide past with lacquered trays. Guards march in slow patterns, their boots thudding like the heartbeat of the sleepless empire. Servants carry bronze kettles of tea from the kitchens to the emperor's hall, refilling them again and again. Even the call of the night crickets has changed. They chirp as if startled, breaking their usual rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, the water clock in the court astronomer's chamber drips with deliberate cruelty. Each droplet marks another moment stolen from sleep. You imagine the water jar inside, with its careful channels and copper spouts, built to measure hours that no longer exist. You try to steady your breath. There is no telling when the emperor might appear. Since the decree, his schedule has dissolved into something unknowable. He might summon a minister at the hour when shadows are longest. He might order a poem recited when dawn is about to break, and if he suspects anyone of drowsing, the punishment is instant. One rumor says a young court musician fell asleep while tuning his lute 2 nights ago. He was ordered to play until the strings snapped under his hands, while a soldier held his eyelids open with the edge of a jade hairpin. Another whisper tells of a cook who dozed for a breath while kneading dough. He now walks the kitchens with his eyelids stitched together, not because he is allowed to sleep, but because he must work blind, so the memory of his mistake stays in everyone's mind. Your own hands are trembling. You've learned to drink tea so strong it leaves a bitter film on your tongue. But tea can only hold off exhaustion for so long. Past the corridor, you hear the clack of dice against a polished table. The Emperor has taken to summoning small gambling circles at odd hours, betting not for gold but for secrets. Ministers sit in his presence, forced to smile as their eyes sting and water. One man lost a round and was ordered to recite the dynastic lineage backward without pause. When he faltered, the Emperor only laughed, a short, cold sound, and had the man walk laps around the palace courtyard until sunrise. In your mind, you try to remember what silence used to sound like here. Before the decree, night in the palace meant oil lamps burning low, guards speaking only when necessary, the faint scent of night, blooming flowers from the imperial gardens. Now the air smells of sweat and boiled tea leaves, and there is no silence. Only footsteps, voices, the metallic clink of bronze vessels. A eunuch approaches you, his face powdered pale to hide the purple shadows under his eyes. The Emperor is in the hall of clear radiance, he says. His voice is thin, as if each word costs effort. He requests the presence of all senior attendants. You bow and follow him through the twisting corridors. The hall doors stand open, spilling torchlight into the courtyard. Inside, the Emperor sits on the raised throne, leaning forward on one elbow. His eyes are bright, almost fevered. Before him, a scribe reads aloud from a bamboo scroll, his voice trembling over the words of an ancient military treatise. The Emperor interrupts him suddenly. Do you think? He says, his voice carrying through the hall, that generals win wars because they sleep. No, they win because they are awake when the enemy is not. The scribe swallows and bows, not daring to answer. The Emperor's gaze sweeps over the room. You feel it pass over you like a blade. He smiles faintly, and the torchlight catches on the gold thread of his robe. We are building an empire that will never blink, he says. An empire that will never yawn. History will remember us as the dynasty without shadows. His words hang in the air. No one speaks. You keep your head lowered, though your mind churns. After a pause, the Emperor gestures for music. The court musicians step forward, plucking and bowing their instruments, forcing their fingers to move even as their bodies sway from fatigue. The sound is beautiful and brittle at once, like porcelain about to crack. The night drags on, hours pass, or perhaps it is only minutes. The tea runs out and is refilled. The musicians change songs without being told. One attendant sways too far to the side and steadies himself with a quick gasp. You see the Emperor's eyes narrow at the movement. When dawn finally comes, it arrives like a pale stranger creeping into the hall with thin light. The Emperor stands, stretches, and smiles as if nothing is unusual. We will meet again, he says, when the sun is highest. It is a promise and a threat. As you leave the hall, your knees ache from standing. The gardens outside look dull in the morning light. Flowers droop under dew, their petals half, closed as if in silent protest. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, commoners are waking from a full night's sleep, unaware of the strange war being fought inside these walls. A war not against a rival kingdom, but against the human need to rest. You find yourself thinking of the old palace nurse, long dismissed, who once told you, the body can forgive hunger for a time, but it never forgives the theft of sleep. You wonder how long this theft can go on before the empire begins to pay. The torches burned low in the inner hallways, their light trembling as if unsure whether it was worth the effort to keep shining. The palace no longer kept the rhythm of day and night. There was only one long, unbroken blur of wakefulness, stitched together by moments of half, conscious drifting that no one dared to call sleep. You had walked these corridors 1,000 times before, but now they felt narrower. The shadows clung to the stone like damp cloth, and the air had that stale taste it only gets when people have been breathing it without pause. The court officials leaned against pillars as they waited for summons, blinking slowly as though each eyelid weighed more than a coin of lead. A servant passed by carrying a tray of porcelain cups. He moved with mechanical precision, eyes glassy. You caught the faint aroma, bitter tea brewed far too strong, the liquid so black it was almost blue in the light. It was the only thing keeping half the court from collapsing entirely. Somewhere ahead you heard it, the sound the palace had begun to call the corridor whispers. Not a single voice, but dozens, layered and overlapping, spilling out from rooms where scribes worked without pause. A constant murmur of quills scratching, orders being repeated, and nervous recitations of reports for fear of forgetting them. You turned a corner and almost walked into Master Huey, the keeper of the treasury. He had always been a man of exact movements and perfect grooming, but now his robe hung loose, his hairline was damp, and his eyes darted about as if trying to catch thoughts before they escaped. "Have you seen it?" he asked in a voice far too soft for someone who usually spoke like a drumbeat. "Seen what?" you replied. He glanced over his shoulder, then leaned closer. "The Emperor, he doesn't walk any more. He glides. Feet still move, but it's as if he isn't entirely touching the floor. You thought it ridiculous, until you remembered the last time you had seen His Majesty. His gaze had been unfocused, as though looking through you instead of at you. His posture had been rigid, yet his steps were unnervingly smooth. Master Huey's voice dropped even lower. There are those who think he's no longer fully awake, that he's begun to dream standing up. But if that is so, then why? Why is he more dangerous than before?" The words lingered long after he shuffled away. In the Hall of Records, you saw clerks swaying in place, their scrolls held like anchors keeping them upright. Ink stains were everywhere, on the floors, on the hems of robes, even on faces where someone had rubbed their eyes too hard. One young scribe's hand shook so badly that the characters on his page were collapsing into one another. You set down your own documents on a lacquered desk and paused. A strange sound came from outside, something between a chant and a hum, low and rhythmic. You followed it, past an open balcony where the night air rolled in, thick with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Down in the courtyard, a group of palace guards stood in formation, but they were not training. They were rocking, not marching, not standing still, just swaying from side to side, their spears held upright like reeds in a slow wind. The hum came from them. The captain noticed you watching and barked an order. The sound stopped instantly, replaced by stiff silence. Yet the rocking continued, only slower, as if the movement was now part of their bones. Back in the corridor, you met Lady Zion, one of the Emperor's closest attendants. She looked thinner than she had a month ago, her eyes rimmed red. She tried to smile when she saw you, they say. She began, "That sleep is the cousin of death, but here, we have made it the Emperor's enemy, and still it comes for us." Her words made you realize something that had been gnawing at you. People were beginning to slip away, not to sleep, but to vanish entirely from the palace. No farewells, no explanations, simply gone. You remembered the guard at the east gate muttering about carts that left the palace before dawn, covered in tarps. No one ever saw what was underneath. The thought stayed with you through the night, or what passed for night, until the torches were replaced again and the same false daylight resumed. Your own head ached, your vision blurred, and more than once you felt the floor tilt beneath you when it hadn't moved at all. But when you finally caught sight of the Emperor that day, everything Master Huey had said returned in a rush. His Majesty was seated on the dragon throne, yet he looked less like a man and more like an elaborate carving that happened to breathe. His eyes were open, but glassy, and his hands rested perfectly still on the armrests. He didn't blink the entire time you were in the hall. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but each word felt as though it had been dredged up from somewhere far beneath the surface. "We will not rest. We will not falter. We will not—" He stopped mid, sentence. His head tilted slightly, as though listening to something no one else could hear. A pause so long it became unbearable followed, and then he simply waved you all away. The court scattered without question, but you couldn't shake the feeling that whatever he had heard in that moment, it wasn't from this world, and still no one slept. You've stopped asking the question you used to ask every morning, how many hours did I sleep? Now you only ask, how many hours until someone notices? The palace has learned to disguise exhaustion. Courtiers powder their faces to hide the gray pallor, and kohl is drawn thick enough to make the red rims of sleepless eyes look like deliberate fashion. Even the eunuchs, normally the keepers of palace rhythm, have adopted the emperor's new night life, learning to walk as softly as cats so as not to betray the sound of any illicit rest. Tonight is not different in light, but it is different in feeling. The candles are too still. No drafts move the silk drapes. The corridors smell faintly of camphor and sweat. Overripe, stale. Somewhere, someone is holding their breath, and then you see it. At the far end of the gallery, past the row of empty throne stools meant for long, dead ancestors, two figures are whispering in the shadow of a carved lacquer screen, not bowing, not moving as servants. Speaking in the low, quick rhythm of the guilty, you should turn away, because nothing good comes from overhearing, but your steps slow. He doesn't know. One voice murmurs, 3 days. The other answers before the document is ready. Their words are scraps, blown past you like autumn leaves. You catch banquet, seal, and then, most ominously, crown prince. The emperor has no crown prince. You move past, head bowed, pretending not to have heard. But your mind is chewing on the idea all night. Could the sleepless decree be part of something larger? Some test, not of loyalty, but of endurance, to see who collapses first. The thought follows you into the great hall the next morning. The emperor sits high on the dragon throne, eyes wide, body unnaturally upright. He is drinking tea the color of burnt honey, steam curling from the cup in thin, sharp ribbons. The ministers present petitions, their voices dry and mechanical, as if reading from a script. You catch sight of Minister Q. His hands are trembling as he unrolls a scroll. His lips form the words, but his gaze is fixed on something invisible, perhaps the sound of his own heartbeat. Then, without warning, he sways. The scroll slips from his hands, gasps ripple through the court. 2 guards rush forward, but the emperor simply sips his tea, watching the scene with detached amusement. Remove him, the emperor says, as if ordering a stain scrubbed from silk. If he cannot remain awake in my presence, he has no place in this court. The guards drag Minister Q away, his feet leaving streaks of dust on the polished floor. The lesson is not lost on anyone. That night your quarters feel smaller than usual. A knock comes just past the hour of the rat, the middle of the deep night, when only spies and ghosts are awake. You open the door to find Lady Sun, a palace attendant you've spoken to only in passing. Her hair is disheveled, and there's a bead of sweat trembling at her temple. She doesn't bother with pleasantries. If you value your life, you'll come with me now. The journey she leads you on is silent, winding through service passages and side gardens lit only by moonlight. You arrive at a forgotten wing of the palace, a place where the windows are covered in dust and the tapestries smell of mildew. Inside, you find 5 people gathered around a low table. Their faces are unfamiliar, except for one, the scholar who once dared to correct the emperor's poem during a banquet. You had thought he was exiled. He looks up, his voice barely above a whisper. We are ending the sleepless reign. Your throat tightens. You'll be executed, perhaps, he says, but not before the emperor makes a mistake. They lay out the plan in fragments, deliberately in case you're a spy. Something about switching tea leaves, something about a forged edict. Something about making the emperor believe the sun has risen when it has not. It's madness. But in the madness there's a strange clarity. These people are not just tired, they are done. As you return to your quarters before dawn, the corridors feel different, like threads pulling toward a single knot. You realize the sleepless nights are not the real danger anymore. The danger is what sleeplessness makes possible: a ruler who never blinks, and subjects who are too tired to resist. You close your eyes for the briefest moment against the doorframe, just to feel the darkness press against your eyelids. But you do not sleep, not yet. Because you know that in 3 days, something will happen that could shatter the empire, or plunge it into a deeper night than anyone has ever known. You have stopped counting the days, or perhaps the days have stopped counting you. At first, when the Emperor's decree banned sleep, you tried to keep track of how long you had been awake. You scratched tallies into the clay beside your cot: 5 marks, 10 marks, 20. But then the numbers began to lose meaning. Time has become a fluid, shimmering thing, like oil on water. It slides away from you, sometimes pooling strangely, sometimes vanishing altogether. Tonight, though tonight has no edge from last night, the streets feel stranger than usual. The moon is high, yet its shape is wrong. The air smells faintly of crushed mint leaves, though no gardens grow here. And the sound of footsteps, hundreds of them, comes not from the paving stones below, but from somewhere above, as if the clouds themselves are pacing. Your neighbors have begun speaking in tones too quiet to hear, their lips barely moving. You watch them as they pass under the lamplight, eyes open too wide, teeth clenched too long, their bodies jittering like marionettes in the hands of a tired puppeteer. You're beginning to suspect that none of this is entirely real. The Emperor's court ears those who have survived the weeks without collapsing are changing too. Their robes are still bright with embroidered dragons, but the threads are loose, untrimmed. Their hairpins sit crooked in half, greased hair. They no longer bother to bow properly. Instead, they tilt forward as if half, expecting the floor to catch them. And yet, every evening, the court still gathers in the great hall. Candles burn thick and greasy in the corners, releasing a black, smudged smoke that settles into your skin. The Emperor sits on his throne as though it's grown taller, or perhaps he has grown smaller. His eyelids flutter more now he blinks too often, too slow. But the decree remains: no one will sleep until the Empire is truly awake. No one is sure what truly awake means anymore. Then, one evening, if it is evening, something changes. From the shadows behind the pillars, a whisper slides to you: they're here. You turn and at first see nothing. Then the figures step into the lamplight, 5 of them, cloaked, their faces half covered. They move like people who still know how to rest. Their eyes are steady, and their breath is not ragged. One leans toward you and murmurs, "We dream in shifts." The words are like water in your ears, too cool, too soothing. You want to ask what they mean, but the cloaked ones are already gone, melting into the press of the sleepless crowd. Rumors spread by morning. There is a faction within the city, an underground order calling themselves the Keepers of Rest. No one knows where they hide, but they supposedly slip into deep slumber for hours at a time, using dreams to plan their resistance. Some say they have mastered the art of sleeping with their eyes open. Others claim they have tunnels lined with mats and blankets stolen from the palace itself. You're not sure which version you believe, but you know you want to find them. That night, the hallucinations deepen. Shadows no longer cling to walls, they wander. The smell of mint returns, stronger this time, mixed with something metallic. You hear a soft tapping in the rafters of your own room, but when you look, it's not mice. It's hands, dozens of pale hands gripping the beams, their fingers twitching in unison. You close your eyes for a moment, just one moment. When you open them again, the hands are gone, and the room feels smaller. You begin searching the city quietly, the tavern by the old bell tower empty, the spice market's back rooms abandoned, the storerooms by the dried-up canal only rats. Finally, you follow a thread of quiet laughter down an alley, so narrow your shoulders scrape the walls. A lantern hangs at the far end, its light wrapped in blue silk. A figure waits there, not cloaked, but draped in a simple cotton robe. Their eyes clear, steady fix on you. You're not meant to be awake, they say. Neither of you moves for a long time. That is how you first hear the plan. The keepers of rest are not fighting the emperor with weapons. They are fighting with dreams, collective dreams, woven together by sleeping in patterns and shifts, passing visions like secret messages. They believe that if enough people share the same dream, the emperor will be forced into it, and inside that dream, they can make him see what he's done. You ask if it will work. The figure smiles, and it's the kind of smile you haven't seen in weeks, one that doesn't tremble. It will, they say, if you can still tell the difference between waking and sleeping. You don't answer, because you're not sure you can, and as you follow them deeper into the alley, past the blue lit lantern, you begin to wonder if you've already fallen asleep without knowing it. But that is a story for tomorrow night. The storm that has been circling the empire for years finally begins to break. Not a storm of rain or wind. Those have long been tamed by walls, canals, and prayers, but the kind of storm born from human exhaustion. From too many years of waking when the body begged for rest, from a ruler who mistook sleeplessness for strength and obedience for loyalty, you wake to the sound of boots. Not the soft, deliberate steps of palace guards on night patrol, but the urgent thud of men who do not care if they wake the sleeping. Not that there are many sleeping left. Most of the servants have long since trained themselves to rise at the slightest noise, their bodies tense as bows in the dark. A junior clerk bursts into your chamber without knocking. His hair is uncombed, his eyes rimmed red, not from lack of discipline, but because the palace's wake cycles no longer match the rhythm of the sun. He leans in close, whispering as if the walls themselves might carry his voice to the wrong ears. The western garrison, it's moved. It takes you a moment to understand. Not moved in the usual way, marching to a border post or setting out to patrol a caravan route. Moved as in marched toward the capital. 1,000 soldiers, led by a general, whose patience with the sleepless decree has thinned to the width of a knife. By midday, the rumors are thick enough to taste. They hang in the air like incense smokes, wheat to those who have long hated the law, bitter to those who know what will happen if the emperor learns they've spoken. You pass the kitchens and hear a cook muttering about the march of the rested. The name makes you pause. It is not the kind of phrase that appears by accident. Someone has been spreading it deliberately, something catchy enough to rally soldiers, traders, and farmers alike. The implication is obvious. If the emperor's men must fight the rested, then the tired will lose. In the afternoon, you are summoned. Not to the imperial study this time, but to the Jade Hall, a chamber reserved for audiences with generals. The vast doors open, and you step inside, greeted by the cold light that filters through carved screens. The emperor sits slouched on his throne, the golden dragons behind him looking more alert than he does. He does not seem to blink as much as he used to. His eyes hold the glassy, too wide stare of a man who has forgotten the comfort of closing them. Around him, his advisors stand like stones. Some look frightened, others look quietly satisfied. They have waited years for this moment. You will ride to the garrison. The emperor says, his voice scraping at the edges, "Tell them the sleepless decree stands. Tell them I will not bow to weakness." The order hits you like cold water. You realize, with a twist in your gut, that this may be the last order you ever carry. The road west is long, and the countryside tells a different story from the one the palace has clung to. Villages where no one dares light lamps at night for fear of imperial patrols. Farmers whose faces are leathery with exhaustion, their bodies moving on instinct while their minds drift half asleep, and here and there, you see it, patches of rebellion. A shutter thrown open at midnight, a bed dragged into the sunlight for an afternoon nap. Small, almost laughable acts of defiance, but they add up. When you reach the garrison, the banners are not flying the emperor's colors. The general, a man named Wu Jinhai, stands at the gate in armor that looks as though it has actually been slept in. A scandalous sight by palace standards. "I will not have my men collapse before the enemy even arrives," he says plainly. "We sleep when the sun sleeps. We rise when the sun rises. Tell the emperor this. You know better than to try to persuade him." Instead, you memorize his words. every syllable heavy with the quiet certainty of a man who has already made his choice. On the ride back, you think about how this began, how the emperor's sleeplessness was once seen as noble vigilance, how it turned to law, how that law turned to poison. When you return to the capital, the palace gates are shut in a way you have never seen before. Guards on the walls keep their hands near their weapons. Inside, the air is heavy with the heat of too many bodies crammed into too small a space. Visors, scribes, and ministers all gathered to decide whether the empire will break from within or without. The emperor hears your report without a word. For a long time the silence stretches, then he laughs, not with mirth, but with the brittle sound of porcelain cracking. If they will not wake, he says, then I will teach them to dream of me even in their sleep. The words are frightening not for their anger, but for their calm. Somewhere deep inside, you realize he no longer believes in his own decree, but he will not be the one to end it. The night before the coup smells of rain, not fresh rain, but the kind that hangs heavy in the air for hours before it finally breaks, thick, damp, metallic. You can almost taste it as you walk past the courtyard where the imperial guards stand, their spears upright, their faces like carved masks. No one says a word, but you feel the air vibrating with unspoken plans. The emperor is awake, as always, but tonight it feels less like a performance of strength and more like a man too frightened to close his eyes. You find him in his study, leaning over maps of the palace, his ink brush tapping restlessly against the edge of the table. There are no poets reading verses to him tonight, no astronomers whispering of the stars, only the sound of paper being unrolled and his shallow breathing. You've heard them. He says, without looking up, "They think I am weak. They think that if they wait long enough, I will collapse." You want to tell him they might be right, not because his mind is gone, but because his body is brittle from years without proper rest. But that is the sort of truth that gets a servant killed. Instead, you bow and ask if he will eat something. He shakes his head. "I cannot eat, not tonight. Sleep is the enemy, but hunger. Hunger is a weapon I can endure." The lamps burn low. You notice his hand trembling slightly as he rolls another scroll flat. It is a report from the northern provinces. Rebellion there, too. Not open rebellion yet, but the kind that begins in murmurs over rice wine and ends in banners on the horizon. Outside, the wind begins to rise. The guards in the courtyard shift their weight, the leather of their armor creaking softly. You know they are not merely here for protection. They are here to choose which side to take when the moment comes. The rain finally begins, slow at first, then in steady sheets, drumming against the roof tiles like an impatient summons. In the flicker of lamplight, you see the emperor's face change, not softening, but tightening with some private calculation. You wonder if he hears the same thing you do in the rain, the footsteps of those who will come for him, muffled by the storm. He sends you away just before dawn. It is the first time in years he has dismissed you before the sun rises. You walk back through the corridors, the rain still tapping at the eaves, and you can't shake the feeling that when you return tomorrow, the palace will no longer belong to him. By the time you return to the palace, the rain has stopped, but the air is thick with the smell of wet stone and trampled blossoms. The night storm has left the courtyards littered with petals from the plum trees, soft splashes of white and pink scattered across the dark flagstones. It is beautiful in a way that makes you uneasy. The beauty feels accidental, careless, like something left behind after the real work of the night is done. The guards at the outer gate are new. You do not recognize their faces, and they do not bow when you pass. Their armor is the same lacquered black as before, but the small bronze medallions at their chests bear a different crest, one you have only seen in distant provincial reports. Your stomach knots. You know without asking that the emperor you served is no longer the one who gives the orders here. Inside, the corridors are quieter than you have ever known them. No murmured poetry from the scholars' quarters. No faint music from the concubines' chambers. Even the kitchens are still. You pass through the central hall and see the great silk banners hanging limply, their bright colors dulled in the morning light, as though they, too, have lost their strength overnight. When you reach the study, the door is already open. There are no guards at the threshold. The desk is still cluttered with maps and scrolls, but the inkstone is dry, and the brush has been left tipped over, the bristles bent. The chair is empty. On the floor lies a single sandal. It is made of woven straw, the kind the emperor preferred when he was alone, and it is damp, either from last night's rain or from being dropped in haste. You do not touch it. You hear voices down the corridor. Not the deep, measured tone of imperial ministers, but the brisk, efficient speech of military men. Their boots click sharply against the tiles as they pass, their words clipped and practical. Assignments, watch rotations, grain storage orders. No one says the emperor's name, not even once. You wander through the palace like a ghost, passing servants who keep their heads down, each moving quickly as if afraid that standing still too long will draw notice. When you reach the western garden, you see the plum trees shaking slightly in the breeze, their blossoms already beginning to rot where they fell in the rain. In the center of the garden, a low table has been set for tea. 3 men in armor sit there, drinking in silence. One of them looks up at you briefly, his eyes sharp and unblinking, and then he returns to his cup as though you were nothing more than part of the scenery. That night you sleep for the first time in years, and it is not in the palace. You curl up on a mat in a rented room above a small shop outside the southern gate. The straw is lumpy, and the roof leaks in one corner, but you sleep deeply, dreamlessly, as though the weight that has pressed on your chest for so long has finally lifted. In your dream there is no emperor, only the sound of rain on the roof, steady and patient, washing away the last of his name. And with that, the story of the emperor who forbade sleep, and was devoured by it in the end, comes to its quiet close.